It was past midnight when I heard the creak of my front door. My porch light flickered through the window, and for a second, I thought it was just the wind. But then I saw a shadow, small, quick, and moving inside my living room. I froze, listening. The next sound wasn't fear. It was the deep, low growl coming from the hallway. My retired police K9, Shadow, had already noticed the intruder. My name's Daniel, a 42-year-old retired police officer who traded city chaos for quiet country life. After 20 years in law enforcement, I'd earned a break. I bought a modest ranch-style home on the edge of town, big yard, tall fences, and plenty of space for my partner, Shadow, a German Shepherd who'd served beside me for nearly a decade on the K9 unit. Life was calm, predictable, and for the first time, peaceful. Most of my neighbors were decent folks who waved as they passed by. All except one, Karen. She lived across the street, the kind of woman who believed every property line was up for discussion. Within a week of moving in, she was already checking my mailbox, complaining about my truck being too loud, and even questioning why I still kept a K9 on my property. "You know," she said one morning, arms folded across her floral robe, "dogs like that can be dangerous. I might have to talk to the HOA about it." I told her politely that Shadow was trained better than most people and that she had nothing to worry about. But that only seemed to fuel her obsession. From that day on, she made it her mission to monitor everything I did, when I mowed, when I took out the trash, even when I walked Shadow at night. Still, I kept my cool. After years on the force, I'd learned to let small people have their small power trips. But Karen's nosiness wasn't small. It was invasive, and I had a gut feeling that one day, she'd cross a line she couldn't uncross. It started small, like most neighborhood feuds do. Karen began filing petty complaints with the HOA, noise violations for my truck, claims that Shadow barked too aggressively, and even a report saying my fence was intimidating. Each one was dismissed, of course. I'd spent years writing incident reports, my paperwork was flawless. But that didn't stop her. She just found new ways to get under my skin. One evening, I caught her standing at the edge of my driveway, phone out, filming Shadow through the fence. "Just collecting evidence," she said with a smug grin. "If something happens, I want proof." "Something?" I repeated. "Karen, the only thing happening here is you trespassing on my property." That shut her up for the moment, but a few days later, I found a city animal control officer at my door. Apparently, Karen had filed a formal complaint claiming my dog attacked her. The officer took one look at Shadow, calm, tail wagging, ball in his mouth, and sighed. "Sorry, sir, we get a lot of false reports from this street." I was furious, but I kept it to myself. Letting anger show would only feed her. Then one night, around 11 p.m., I noticed something odd. My porch light flickered on, triggered by motion. When I peeked through the blinds, I saw Karen standing on my lawn, phone light shining through my window like she was trying to see inside. I stepped out quietly. "You lost something, Karen?" I asked, voice steady. She jumped back. "I was checking because your dog was barking again." Shadow was asleep at my feet. That's when I realized, this wasn't about noise or safety. It was about control. She wanted to scare me, to push until I reacted. I made a choice right then, I wasn't going to be her next target. If she wanted to cross boundaries, I'd let her, just far enough to expose herself completely. It happened on a Sunday evening. I just finished cleaning up after dinner and was upstairs folding laundry when Shadow gave a low growl, the kind of sound that meant business. At first, I thought maybe a raccoon had gotten into the trash again, but then I heard it, the faint creak of my back door. The handle turned slowly, followed by the soft squeak of sneakers on tile. Someone was inside my house. I grabbed my phone, hit the silent record, and moved toward the stairs. Shadow was already alert, standing by my side but waiting for my signal. I peeked down and saw a flashlight beam scanning through my living room. And then I saw her. Karen. She was actually inside, in her floral pajama pants, phone in one hand, mumbling to herself. "Let's see what you're hiding, Daniel. They'll believe me when I show them this." She was filming. Inside my home. I felt a cold wave of disbelief. This wasn't a nosy neighbor anymore, this was a criminal act. I quietly unlocked Shadow's command latch. "Stay," I whispered. Then, from the top of the stairs, I said calmly, "Karen. What exactly do you think you're doing in my house?" She spun around, eyes wide, flashlight trembling. You left your door open." "I was checking for your dog. It was barking again." "My door has a keypad lock," I said evenly. "You don't get in by accident." Karen's face went pale. I'll just go," but before she could move, I gave one quiet word, "Guard." Shadow stepped from the shadows of the hallway, his deep growl echoing through the room. His stance was firm, protective, not violent, but it froze her in place. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. "Call him off. He's attacking me." "He's not attacking," I said, filming her the whole time. "He's waiting." Karen tried to bluster her way out, shouting about citizens' rights and dangerous animals, but she knew she'd gone too far. And when I pointed to the security camera's red light blinking in the corner, the one recording her every move, she stopped talking altogether. That was the breaking point. The look in her eyes shifted from arrogance to fear. She knew this time, she'd stepped into a trap she couldn't talk her way out of. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted a paper trail that left no room for Karen's theatrics to wiggle out of. So I treated it like any other case file I'd ever handled: evidence first, escalation second, exposure last. First thing I did was secure every recording. The house cameras had the whole incident. I copied the files to 3 separate drives and uploaded backups to the cloud. I also saved the audio from my phone and noted timestamps. Then I printed stills, her flashlight beam over my bookshelf, the shot of her feet by the coffee table, and labeled each one. Small, neat, unemotional. Next, I lined up witnesses. I asked the neighbor who'd complained about hearing voices that night to sign a brief statement. I texted a few folks who'd seen Karen lurking earlier and asked if they'd give sworn statements if needed. Most agreed. Once they realized she'd gone inside my home, their hesitation vanished. Then I called the sheriff and filed an official trespass and intent to record complaint. The deputy who took the report listened, then asked for copies. I handed over the files. That moved it from he said/she said to a criminal report on record. Mini twist: Karen had been live streaming parts of her investigation. I saved the live stream clip, her own commentary, her laughter, embedding her admission into the file. It was the kind of self-incrimination prosecutors love. I also drafted a concise complaint for the HOA and requested an emergency meeting. If the HOA wanted to act like a moral authority, they'd have to explain why one of their watchers felt empowered to violate private property. Finally, I sat back and let the system run: sheriff contact, HOA pressure, and evidence that made deniability impossible. I didn't need to shout. The records would do it for me. The morning the sheriff showed up, I walked him through the house like a detective explaining a scene. He watched the footage on my tablet, the way she eased the window, the flashlight beam cutting across my rug, her own words about proving me wrong. The deputy didn't need a lecture, he tapped the screen and said, "We'll take this from here." We arranged a calm, public moment. The HOA president agreed to meet at the community room because she'd been forced into the middle of it. Several neighbors came too, drawn by curiosity and the thin thread of dignity Karen had pulled too tight. The deputy played the live stream clip on a muted laptop, Karen's laughter, her commentary, then the part where she improvised bravado as Shadow emerged from the hallway. You could hear the intake of breath in the room. Her own voice was the evidence that undid her. Karen tried to spin it, claims about checking on safety, wobbly explanations about concerned citizenry, but every line she used was already in the recording, time-stamped, and backed by sworn statements. The deputy read the trespass statute aloud, then asked her simple questions. She stumbled, contradicted herself, and finally went quiet. Her bravado flickered like a cheap bulb. When the HOA president held up the bylaws and pointed out the rule about authorized monitors and conduct, a few faces around the table nodded. The board had to act. Karen was issued a formal warning, charged with trespassing, and flagged in the HOA records. The sheriff left with a copy of the footage for the county prosecutor. Best of all, none of it felt like vengeance. It felt like paperwork and community standards doing their job. Karen's audience evaporated. The woman who'd claimed moral high ground now had to walk the walk, alone and exposed, while the rest of us got our quiet neighborhood back. After Karen's trespass incident went public within the HOA, life slowly returned to normal, but with a sense of quiet vindication. The HOA officially reprimanded her in writing, detailing the violation and the trespass charge that had been filed. Copies went into the community records, ensuring that any future antics would be met with instant accountability. Her attempts to charm neighbors or rewrite the narrative were met with polite nods and polite, but firm, indifference. My neighbors, initially curious and hesitant, now respected the steps I'd taken. Conversations about watchful security measures and community boundaries became common. Many even joked about Shadow's role as our unsung guardian, and a few kids waved whenever he strolled by on his leash. The fear and tension Karen had sown evaporated, the sense of safety that had been missing for weeks was restored. Personally, I felt an enormous sense of relief. Watching the HOA and law enforcement handle the situation professionally reminded me that revenge doesn't need to be dramatic or messy, it can be a matter of letting evidence and rules work in your favor. Shadow became a minor hero, earning treats and the admiration of everyone in the household. Most importantly, I reclaimed my space. My living room, once a stage for Karen's overreach, was now truly mine. And while the community had witnessed the fallout, the experience reinforced a valuable lesson: standing firm, documenting evidence, and letting justice run its course is more satisfying than anger alone. Peace was restored, and the neighborhood could finally breathe easy again. Looking back, the whole ordeal with Karen reminded me of something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling or scheming, it's staying calm, following the rules, and letting the consequences unfold naturally. By documenting everything and trusting the system, I not only protected my home but also sent a clear message that overstepping boundaries comes with real repercussions. Shadow, my loyal K9, became more than a companion. He was a guardian, a silent reminder that vigilance matters. To anyone watching, the takeaway is simple: respect your space, know your rights, and don't underestimate the power of preparation and evidence. Justice doesn't always have to be dramatic, but it should always be firm. If you've enjoyed this story and want more tales of standing up to overbearing neighbors and HOA drama, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens.